My great-grandfather was the second generation of my Chinese ancestors to arrive in New South Wales, and yet he did play a role in making for a more modern Chinese Australian community. His adult name was Cheng Fan Chong, and he loved the camera. There's no two ways about it. He liked being photographed. But photographs were used to bind the community across the Australian colonies together so that people in distant places could see the city folk, by and large, who were agitating and acting on their behalf, whether it was to make the home country to which most of them hoped to return a more European place in a political sense, or whether it was to ensure that the people who were here were defended in their rights to run a shop or to work in industries. He came out in 1877, aged 13, roughly, probably accompanied by an older brother, certainly clansman. He was the child of a very wealthy family, judging by photos of the family home back in China. But when he applied for naturalisation in 1883, he claimed he was a carpenter, a respectable and quite common occupation for Chinese workers, Chinese migrants in Australia. At the same time as having learned to be a carpenter, he was completely literate in Chinese, but he also was literate in English, reading, writing, speaking. And he was also artistically trained, so he would hire himself out to the photographic studios of the day and reproduce photographs as oil-painted portraits of various people who couldn't afford the time to sit still for a conventional portrait. And he worked for a variety of photographers in the city, but also in Parramatta. By the turn of the century, the 20th century, he had become involved with the New South Wales Chinese Chamber of Commerce and the Chinese Empire Reform Association, an international organisation seeking a constitutional monarchy in China. So he became a relatively important person in the Chinese community, and he was often treasurer for fundraising events, whether it was for famines, flood relief, or indeed raising funds to modernise the Chinese Navy. His later efforts were very much involved with the Chamber of Commerce in Chinatown, which had its headquarters at 52 Dixon Street. Possibly it's part of his experience of having worked as a carpenter. He was sympathetic to the struggles of particularly the furniture workers, and even though he was what we might reasonably call a higher class member of Chinese community and moderately wealthy, he nonetheless would have had a big part in compiling the appeal against yet another round of discriminatory legislation that was proposed by the New South Wales government in 1926. The Chamber of Commerce, the Chinese Chamber of Commerce, was an exceptional thing in that it brought together an overarching organisation that would act on behalf of all Chinese rather than merely clan or village or district associations. Sadly, a lot of those internal differences, and there were differences as well between the monarchists, the Chinese monarchists in Sydney and the Chinese Republicans. I suspect that he probably would have stood up for a more participatory China, a mass participation where the voices of people were actually heard more readily than they are at the moment. We have medals from both governments, presumably celebrating his success or his contributions, but to the Republic. And so that's interesting that he moved from that monarchist position to supporting the Republic in its various manifestations until that settled down. There were a lot more Republicans, for whatever reason, in Melbourne than there were in Sydney. But of course, once the Emperor had died, there was no longer an Emperor to protect. And so everyone moved to support Sun Yat-sen's new Republic. It's an unfortunate fact that he married the daughter of a woman who was clearly an assimilationist and raised her daughter Lily as an assimilationist, so that there was not, while there were Chinese artefacts and their husbands were allowed to go out and socialise and be Chinese, it wasn't done at home. So a lot of his achievements are lost to us as a family, and they're only really being recovered through Trove, the National Library's digitisation of newspapers, where we can now see and appreciate just what a significant role he had.